Welcome to LA Rams Central. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Eric.
And this is episode number 79. New hat. Got from one of my students. See? Check it out. Awesome is that. It's got my name. It's got the horns, blue and yellow. I'm wearing the retro Dickerson jersey because the Rams are wearing the old blue and yellows this week against San Fran. Lot to cover. Obviously, the Rams have clinched the division. Very excited about that. Knew that was going to happen. Todd Gurley went absolutely off. We'll cover that. We'll kind of cover the Rams last. What I really want to cover is really just a couple of games that were kind of relevant for the Rams. Minnesota wins 60-0 over Green Bay. It's a big win for them. Somehow, if Philly loses next week, they still get home field advantage. I'm not really sure how that tiebreaker works, but Minnesota's pretty much has locked up the 2 seed. Philly's wrapped up the 1 seed. But the Rams and Saints are kind of going at it. So the 3 that I really want to cover, Eric, are the Rams, Titans last, Seahawks, Cowboys, and Saints, Falcons. Now, I watched both the Saints, Falcons, and the Ram game, so why don't you go ahead and cover Seattle, Dallas. I saw bits and pieces of that game, but obviously the pick 6 was big, but Seattle looked like a completely different team than the one that got obliterated by Los Angeles. So go ahead and take that one away.
Yeah, with Seattle, Dallas, the whole thing with them is that they just won't go away. Now, but, as far as the Cowboys are concerned, first, they couldn't get in the end zone. Seattle's defense came to play. Jimmy Graham is a monster in the red zone. He had another touchdown catch there. He's gonna be a free agent at the end of the season, so it'll be interesting to see if he re-signs in Seattle or not. Obviously, at halftime it was 9-7 Dallas, but the play that really turned the corner in the game was Justin Coleman's 30-yard interception return for a touchdown. Dak actually leads the league in pick sixes this year. I believe that was his 4th. And again, Dallas came down a few minutes later, kicked a field goal, could not get over the hump and get in the end zone. And they had Ezekiel Elliott back. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, why. I'm curious why Dallas would be first and goal at the 5 and not give the ball to Elliott twice.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just horrendous play calling. Not bad enough to get your head coach fired, but questions start being asked. Play calling questions start being asked. If I were Elliott, I'd be like, "Give me the damn ball."
Yeah.
And then, of course, Seattle. Then after they were up 14-12. Baldwin caught a 6-yard pass from Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is trying to sneak into that MVP discussion, but I think it's a 2-horse race right now and everybody else. Wilson has the numbers, but Seahawks currently on the outside looking in, so they need to win their game and they need the Falcons to lose their game to get in to the playoffs. So Seattle, a lot of people thought that the Cowboys were going to run all over the Seahawks, and I think, Anthony, you were one of them.
Yeah, I was.
I might have been one of. I was one of those too. Elliott's back. He's 6 weeks fresh. Hasn't been hit in 6 weeks. Went on a nice vacation to who knows where in the world, and he came out. He had 24 carries, 97 yards. I'm sure he would have loved that 100 coming off a 6-week layoff, but. There's no excuse not to give him the ball because the Dallas was stopped. Then they got a couple of penalties and they moved back, and that's where they got the 39-yard field goal from. So
Well, it's funny to me because it's the Pete Carroll syndrome. You don't give the ball to your best player in that situation. How many times have we seen the Rams give the ball to Todd Gurley in that situation? I don't understand it, but it is what it is. And Seattle will have a tough game, tougher than they expect against Arizona at the end of the year. But I fully expect the Atlanta-Carolina game to come down to the end. Atlanta looked bad against New Orleans, but that's been their MO all year. They look bad on the road. They look better at home. They're home against Carolina. They beat the Saints at home, so I have no reason to believe they can't beat Carolina at home. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll do our predictions here in a minute, and kind of how I think the playoffs are going to shape up, and then we'll go with how you think the playoffs are going to shape up. But the Falcon game to me was really surprising in the sense that the Saints really just their defense to me is what should be talked about after that Falcon game. The ridiculous interception by Latimer, the phenomenal run stops inside the 5 against Atlanta. The coverage was absolutely suffocating. I mean, this Saint team, it just looked like they look unbeatable at home is what they look like. And Atlanta at no point was even in this football game. I think at one point it might have been 20-3. The Saints to me played this game like they knew Tampa Bay was going to lose to Carolina, and they didn't even look at the scoreboard. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't be surprised if some key players on that team didn't look at the scoreboard. Might have been some scoreboard watching by a couple of bench players, maybe some of the lower end coaches. But I promise you, the coordinators, the head coach, none of them were looking at the Buccaneer Carolina game. They were assuming Carolina was going to win that because of who they were playing, and they were just totally focused and zeroed in on this game. Matt Ryan was shut down. Julio Jones had a better game than I expected, but he struggled all year long. This is just, to me, this game was all about New Orleans, and I fear they're going to get the 3 seed, and we'll get to that in a minute. But is there anything you want to add to that game?
Yes. Atlanta looks discombobulated.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have that look going into the end of the season and into the playoffs like they had last year. There's a lot of problems with Falcons.
Oh, yeah.
And it first and foremost starts with Matt Ryan. He has definitely taken a couple of steps back from his MVP season last year, or his MVP-like season last year, where he just went off and was probably the top 3 quarterback in the game last year. Their defense is another. They just can't seem to get Coleman and Freeman going at the same time like they were unstoppable last year. I mean, we're comparing the Falcons team, to the previous year, like we've done with every other team that's gone on and had a great season. And people compare the 2017 Cubs to the 2016 Cubs, and they want to do all those comparisons. And I apologize for the baseball comparison, but you could do it for any sport. I guess that's my point. Atlanta just hasn't been there. I won't be surprised if they miss the playoffs and they lose. Just to reiterate what you said, that Minnesota is pretty much locked into the number 2 seed. That is not entirely 100% accurate just yet. If the Rams lost and the Saints lost, and the Panthers won and the Vikings lost, the Panthers hold a tiebreaker.
Oh, yeah.
The Panthers could technically get the number 2 seed.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But, well, it's all but locked up.
Because the other 3 teams are 11-4. Minnesota's 12-3. And
Yeah.
Carolina at 11-4 is a wild card right now.
Right, but Minnesota's not going to lose, New Orleans is not going to lose to Tampa Bay. And
if they say, hey, we're in the playoffs, let's rest some starters. We'll rest Drew Brees. We'll rest Kamara and Ingram and
Eric, stop. They're in
stop.
Eric, no, that doesn't even make sense. They're not going to rest their starters. They haven't clinched the division yet.
I understand that. I'm saying they could. They won't. They could.
Yeah, no, nobody has ever done that in football history that was in a division race. It'd be one thing if it was like the Rams where they've got everything locked up and it's a difference between a 3 or a 4 seed. It's another thing altogether when you're in a division race.
Well, it doesn't make sense. And we're going to get to Rams. It doesn't make sense what they're about to do because of the seeding. And if I was the Rams, I'd rather be the 3 seed.
Well, I don't disagree with that. Minnesota gets the Bears at home. So, barring a miracle, I don't think they're going to lose. Look, I want to cover the Ram game first because there was a lot of history made here. The Rams win 11 games as Los Angeles for the first time since 1989. They win the division as the Los Angeles Rams for the first time since 1985. Also, the last time they hosted a playoff game as Los Angeles, which they're about to do next week in 2 weeks. I'm hoping they win 12 games as Los Angeles for the first time since 1978, but we'll have to wait and see on that. It's the first time the Rams have made the playoffs since 2004. It's the first time the Rams have won a division since 2003. So, there's a lot of history there. This game, to me, it was the Todd Gurley and Jared Goff show. Jared Goff was lights out on third down. Todd Gurley was absolutely brutalizing the Tennessee defense. And that Ram defense played really tough at the right times. That fourth down play is a perfect example. Mariota not only had nowhere to go, but the pocket broke down. Connor Barwin had the game of the year, as far as I'm concerned, from him. I haven't seen him play that good all year long, and he's played pretty well this season. So that was an outstanding performance by him. He basically did for the Rams on Sunday what Chris Long did for the Eagles on Monday. He was just constantly in the backfield harassing Mariota and flying all over the joint. I thought the absence of Kayvon Webster would hurt. It did a little bit, but the Rams are flying around and making plays. A big defensive stop, another turnover early in the game that led to points to get them on top. But really, you can't talk about this game and not talk about Todd Gurley. Over 250 all-purpose yards. I think he scored 3 or 4 touchdowns. Had an 80-yard screen pass, which was just ridiculous. You really saw him jet and then run out of gas at the end, but it didn't matter. This was a performance that the Rams needed to have on the road. What I like about it is they did it in a playoff atmosphere on the road against a good football team that can run the ball. And they have a dual threat quarterback, even though that dual threat hasn't been there since the injury. And they won the game against a good defense as well. So they went 4-0 against the South, which was good. 7-1 on the road. And now they come home for their final game of the year to play the 49ers. We'll touch on what the Rams are about to do in a minute. But why don't we go ahead, Eric, and talk about this game. What did you take away from this game from what you saw?
The way that Goff and Gurley played, I thought the game was going to be more of a blowout than a 4-point game. Tennessee had their chance to take the lead, and the Rams defense stepped up when they needed to. Tennessee's played close games, but they've lost the close games as well, and this is what's hurt them majority of the year. DeMarco Murray tore his MCL, also an LCL injury. He said he wants to play on Sunday, but when you're on one leg, it's kind of hard, especially if you're running back.
Yeah.
Goff had a great game. Gurley was outstanding. That 80-yard run, you already touched on it. That he ran out of gas, at the end, and it didn't matter. But the acceleration that he had blowing past the secondary was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I swear, I was watching Barry Sanders again.
Yeah.
That's how the type of speed that I remember Barry Sanders having, and that's the type of speed that Gurley had in that game. It was good seeing everybody get involved in the game as well. I mean, nobody had huge numbers outside of Gurley. As far as wide receivers, like I said, I like that everybody got involved. Kupp was involved. Woods was involved. Watkins was involved. They even got Tyler Higbee involved. All those numbers weren't really the greatest, but 2 catches, 15 yards. Hey, you know what? If you're winning games like that, you get 2 catches for 15 yards. Hey, everybody's going to forget about you until that one day where everybody's going to remember you.
Yeah.
So, and that could come in the first playoff game that they play, whoever they play. Hey, it could be Higbee with 75 to 90 yards receiving because nobody can stop him. And if you play the Falcons, he could be the one with that huge game.
Yeah.
But yeah, to go on the road, like they did, to go on the road like they've done all year. And they faced a couple of decent teams on the road. The only team that really kind of smacked them around with the Vikings, but they've been smacking a lot of people around. So I wouldn't take too much out of that loss, except for, hey, if you play them again in the playoffs, kind of know what to expect from their defense.
Yeah.
On the other side of the ball, Tennessee just needs to get healthy. Mariota needs to rest his hamstring, because I feel like as it was getting better, because you were able to see some bursts from him weeks ago, it's kind of dissipated on him. They need Walker to rely on him. They need Corey Davis to show up in big games and stay healthy. They need Rashard Matthews to come back and be a key in that wide receiver for them. And they got two good running backs, so they're there. I just think they took a step back this year from where they were last year. But give the Rams credit where credit's due, because they went in there. They took a game that they needed to take, and I know that the Seahawks are technically 2.5 games behind, especially even if the Rams lost the game to Tennessee, they'd be 10-5, and Seattle would be 9-6. But you want to keep the Seahawks in your rearview mirror. You do not want them to catch up no matter what.
Yep.
With that being said, currently they're on the outside looking in. I'm sure the Rams don't want to have to face the Seahawks for a third time in the season. I'm sure they don't want to have to do that. Don't get me wrong. I think they would take them to the woodshed again if that were the case. But this Rams team is playing good football at the right time. You know what happens when you play good football at the right time?
Yeah, you go far.
Good things happen. Good things happen. I mean, don't get me wrong. Vikings are playing good football. Rams are playing good football. The Saints are playing good football. The Panthers are playing good football. Listen, this NFC, for the first time in years, the NFC playoffs are going to be the one to watch.
Yeah.
Now, I think the Eagles are very vulnerable, just because of what I saw the last week with them, and the Rams could be, Eagles could be right for the picking if no matter who they face, the Vikings, the Rams, the Saints, the Panthers, number 6 seed, whoever.
Yeah.
That's why they play the game. And the Rams are that team right now that can go on the road, they can be at home, they can be just as dangerous wherever they play. And they proved it.
Even a neutral site, which they won in a neutral site this year as well in London. So, yeah. I'm going to go over basically how I think the playoffs are going to break down. So I'll cover certain games. You may cover the same games. I don't know. I'm going to start with the AFC. New England is playing the Jets. I don't think it's going to be a loss for New England. I think they're going to end up going 14-2 and wrapping up the 1 seed. Pittsburgh gets Cleveland. That's a no-brainer. Pittsburgh, with their 5th stringers, could beat Cleveland, so that's going to be the 2 seed. Just the Browns don't have an answer for anything that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to show in this game. Baltimore at home against Cincinnati. I think Baltimore gets in with the what are they right now? 5?
Baltimore right now is the 5th seed.
Yeah. So I think they'll lock up the 5th seed with their win. They're going to beat Cincinnati and get the 5 seed. I think the 3 seed is going to go to Jacksonville. They're not resting their starters. I think they are going to beat Tennessee. That game is in
Nashville.
Ooh. You know what? The Titans may win it. They just played a much better offense and a better quarterback. What happens if the Titans win? Do they win the division? No, the Jags already won the division. So
yeah.
I'm going to say my gut tells me that.
Well, the Titans right now, okay, they're 8-7. They're in the 6th.
Yeah.
So if they win, they're in.
And I think they're going to. I think they're going to beat Jacksonville and have to go to Jacksonville next week in the wild card round. So your 3 seed then at that point would be Kansas City at 10-6. Is that correct?
If the Jaguars lose and the Chiefs win, they'd both be 10-6.
Right. Who gets the 3 seed?
I think based on strength of schedule, the Chiefs.
Right. So I've got Kansas City. Well, no, because they were saying if Tennessee wins, I think it might be Jacksonville because 3 would play 6. So I think Jacksonville would play Tennessee. I think Kansas City will play Baltimore, in which case that's how I see the playoffs breaking up. So I do think Jacksonville is going to lose to the Titans. I think it's going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be a good game, but I do think that the Titans, having seen the Rams and being at home and how well they played at home, yes, they're down DeMarco Murray, but the Jaguars don't exactly have the same answers on offense that the Rams did. Now, they have a slightly better defense, so that'll be interesting. But correct me if I'm wrong, Tennessee beat Jacksonville earlier this year.
Week 2, 37-16, they blitzed them.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be that, but I think it's going to be a closer game. I'm going to go with Tennessee sweeping Jacksonville and getting into the playoffs. And then as far as Kansas City at Denver, I don't see the Chiefs losing to Denver.
Well, I don't know if you heard, and I don't know if this might sway your pick, but Kansas City is starting Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, that sways my pick. I think Denver's going to win. I think Kansas City is not a good enough football team right now to rest anybody, and they need to get Alex Smith right, especially with them possibly getting Baltimore or Tennessee. It's on the road. Mile High is a tough place to play. I'm going to go with Denver. So that will move Kansas City for sure to the 4 seed at 9-7. That's how I see the AFC breaking down, Eric. How do you see it?
All right, well, I think that the Jaguars right the ship. I think they were humbled by that loss to San Francisco. Hey, listen, San Francisco is hotter than anybody in football right now. If you put San Francisco up against Pittsburgh, they give them a run. If you put San Francisco played Jacksonville already and beat them 44-33. If you put San Francisco up against Philly, if you put San Francisco up against the Vikings, if you put San Francisco up against the Saints, I'm not saying the Rams because that's who they play in Week 17. I think San Fran has a good shot to beating a lot of those teams right now. They're playing really well. It's a small sample size, but it just so happens that small sample size started with Garoppolo.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go a little off here, and people are like, oh, Brady's good. Brady's only good because he's a system quarterback. Well, then what do you call Garoppolo? Garoppolo is not a system quarterback. Then now he's played in 2 systems this year. Getting a little bit of preseason action. That's still the New England system. Okay, I mean, yes, it's more vanilla than anything during that time. But then he goes into Kyle Shanahan's office. First start against the Bears, 5 field goals. Since then, touchdowns after touchdowns after touchdown.
Yeah. Well, you're on San Francisco.
They're a tough team right now.
So Jacksonville.
Right. And that's why, they went in against Jacksonville. I think the Jaguars are humbled by that loss. They're going to look at the tape themselves. They committed dumb penalties. Okay? Those can be righted. Don't get me wrong, they're going to study a lot of that film. They're going to say, you know what, we're going to throw week 2 away against Tennessee because they were a completely different team and we were a completely different team. At that time, when we lost, we were 1-1. We're 10-5 now. There's a reason why we're 10-5. We've beaten better teams. We went into Pittsburgh and smacked them in the mouth.
Yep.
Jacksonville beats Tennessee.
Okay.
That knocks Tennessee out of the playoffs. So who takes over that? Well, you have the Raiders at the Chargers, and you also have Buffalo at Miami. Now, we've seen what happens when teams go down to Miami. They treat it like a vacation because it's warm, it's out of the cold weather. We've seen New England's a hell of a lot better than Buffalo. Okay? Buffalo's not going to go down to Miami and smack them around like Miami smacked New England around. Miami's going to beat Buffalo. Buffalo's streak of 20 straight years is going to be 20 straight years without the playoffs. So that leaves the Chargers. The Chargers will beat Oakland. The Chargers are better than Oakland. Oakland played a tough game Monday night against Philadelphia. Oakland had that. Oakland could have easily won that game. But Carr threw an interception at the absolute worst time that he could have done it. LA and beating the Chargers or wherever they play. They can play in the moon. It doesn't matter. Oakland's not beating the Chargers. The Chargers are getting the 6th seed, which means the Chargers and Jaguars rekindled their relationship from earlier in the season where they played, where somehow, some way, Jacksonville came out with a win. Okay, LA Chargers gift wrapped that for them. It was a really early Christmas present. And so the Chargers, Jaguars play in Jacksonville. And then you also have Kansas City, Baltimore. Kansas City loses in Denver. Because, again, they're starting Pat Mahomes. I don't agree with it, especially you've only played 3 good games the last quarter of the season. Kansas City needs this game to fix any other deficiencies. Kansas City hosts Baltimore. That's going to be a great game to watch.
What happens if San Diego loses? So you'd have Tennessee, Buffalo, and San Diego losing.
Well, if Tennessee, the Chargers, and the Bills all lose, Tennessee gets in by default.
Okay. So
all three could lose, and Tennessee gets in. And then whoever, if there's one team that wins, they're in.
Okay. So let's go to the NFC. I'll kind of go first here. Philly, I think, is going to lose to Dallas. I just don't think Philly has anything to play for. They better play Foles, but who knows? They may rest people. I think they're going to end up 13-3, but still the 1 seed. I think Minnesota takes care of business against Chicago and goes 13-3 and locks up the 2 seed. I don't think that's going to be any question. So now we get to the Ram 49er game. Now, if you guys haven't heard, the Rams are resting Aaron Donald, Jared Goff, and Todd Gurley. What the hell are we doing? Now, I know the logic is, well, if we're the 4 seed, then we go to Philadelphia. Okay. Unless the 6 seed beats New Orleans, which isn't likely, but let's say that unfolds that way. You still have the better wild card opponent. There's no guarantee you beat Carolina, who I think will be the 5 seed. So you're going to end up getting Carolina, who's 11-5, and infinitely better than Atlanta, who I think will be 10-6. I'll get to that in a minute. You're in a very vicarious situation where you've made the wild card game more difficult than it could have been for the sake of maybe getting the easier matchup in the divisional playoff game, but there's no guarantee that that's going to be easy because it could be that you have to go to Minnesota anyway. So this whole situation of resting guys right now when they're not hurt or they're not hurting, I think is a bad idea. Now, sounds like
Aaron Rodgers syndrome.
Yeah, right. Here's what I think can happen. I think the Rams have enough talent in other positions, and I do think Brown's a good running back, and I don't think San Francisco's defense is very good, and I don't think that the Rams are going to rest their wide receivers, it doesn't look like. So Kupp, Woods, and Watkins, or at least Reynolds, Woods, and Kupp, or certainly Kupp and Reynolds, could have a bigger day than normal. I think we're going to find out a lot about the Ram depth. Playing San Francisco at home, the Rams have not beaten the 49ers at home as the Los Angeles Rams since 1986. Okay? That's a problem. And now we get the Niners and we can sweep them for the first time since 1980. And we're dicking around, again, as the Los Angeles Rams. I'm not talking about as St. Louis. You know, I honestly don't think you're going to beat San Francisco with Sean Mannion, Brown, and whoever they're going to plug in at defensive line. They're resting Alec Ogletree. They're resting Alex Barron. This is bad. We've already downed Kayvon Webster. I hate to say it, Ramily, but I think the Niners are going to beat the Rams because I don't think our depth is that good yet. Now, I could be totally wrong, and the Rams could still go in and blow the doors off of San Francisco because the Niners are on the road and they're a different team. I don't know. But that makes me very nervous. So I'll say what I think happens, Eric. I think the Saints beat Tampa Bay and get the 3 seed. I think this is going to cost the Rams the 3 seed. I think they're going to end up being the 4 seed. I think Carolina loses to Atlanta in Atlanta. And I think Carolina keeps the 5 seed, or because they would still be 11-5. And at that point, Atlanta would be 10-6, and they would be the 6 seed, which means Atlanta goes to New Orleans again, and the Rams host Carolina. That's how I see that breaking down. I am also going to go with my upset of the week. Arizona beat Seattle in Seattle. I'm going to call the upset. This is everything the Cardinals have left to play for. And Seattle's not a very good football team right now. So we'll see what kind of a day Larry Fitzgerald and Stanton can put together. But if Seattle does win, Atlanta's pressure's on Atlanta even more. So, although Atlanta plays first. So that'll be an interesting situation. But I think it's going to be Minnesota, or Philly 1, obviously, Minnesota 2. I think it's going to be New Orleans 3, Los Angeles 4, Carolina 5, Atlanta 6. I think Atlanta goes to New Orleans. I think Carolina goes to Los Angeles. Because I think this resting this many guys, for what? I never understood resting your players, especially when seeding is at stake. You have an opportunity to lock in a 3 seed and guarantee yourself, because here's the other problem if they fall to the 4 seed. Let's say New Orleans goes in to Minnesota and beats the Vikings, which I don't think is that unlikely. Okay? And you go into Philadelphia and you beat the Eagles. Well, guess what? You have to go to New Orleans now. Instead of New Orleans having to come to you. You've completely changed the dynamic of what could have broken down. And going to New Orleans is a much tougher challenge playing on that artificial surface against those running backs than it is playing in grass back home in Los Angeles. Especially in that dome and how loud it can get. And we know how Breeze plays in that dome. It's just a bad idea all the way around. And I fear it's going to backfire. I really do. The only thing that I could pray for is that the Rams get the W anyway and ensure the 3 seed and none of this becomes a concern. Your takey. What's your NFC picture look like?
I'm gonna go off a little something of what you said. I think the Panthers are the worst matchup that you would want to see against the Rams. The way Carolina's playing, and I mean they're really a no-name offense outside of Cameron and McCaffrey. Greg Olsen has changed the dynamic of that offense coming back. Devin Funchess is basically non-existent anymore. When he was the man when Olsen was out. And that's a different dynamic to cover a big tight end down the middle. You guys have had problems with Grant before. You guys have had problems with Rudolph as well. So but you're not the only team. So I don't want to say the Rams are the only team that have a problem with, athletic tight ends going over the middle. But I think the Panthers are the worst team matchup-wise for the Rams.
Well, Carolina doesn't scare me. They're better than Atlanta, but they don't scare me. Because they have no interior blocking. Aaron Donald will dominate like he did a year ago when we were a bad football team. And that's how you beat Cam Newton. You put pressure up the middle. We're not going to fall for that stupid, ridiculous read option crap. We know Cam's going to keep it. I'm not worried about losing to Carolina. I'm worried about going to New Orleans.
I would be worried about Carolina before New Orleans.
Well, I'm not. But go ahead.
Okay. So, here's what I'm thinking. I am picking the 49ers as well because the Rams are rushing so many guys in Goff and especially Gurley. I think this hurts Gurley's MVP chances. He's got 19 touchdowns right now. 20 would look really great for his resume.
Yeah.
Would look awesome for his resume. Would help his resume for MVP. You know Brady's going to play against the Jets and light the Jets up for a half or three quarters before he comes out for Brian Hoyer. So, he's going to throw like 3 touchdown passes in the first quarter to kind of solidify himself. You know that's going to happen. But if I'm the Rams, I don't mess with the playoff football gods because you end up getting bit. When you try to figure out your own seating instead of just playing the game, that's where you end up getting bit badly. The Rams should start Goff. Listen, this is, first full season for Goff. I don't care what he did last year, that he's got those 7 games under his belt from last year. That was a good tutelage, good stepping stone, okay, for what's to come this year. And he has proven a lot of doubters wrong. And the Rams are getting a lot of play. But if the Rams lose on Sunday to San Francisco and New Orleans wins in Tampa, which New Orleans is going to beat Tampa because Tampa's god-awful, switch those positions so the Saints get the 3, the Rams get the 4. The Panthers I have beating the Falcons, and the Seahawks beating the Cardinals, which, well, the Seahawks and Falcons are now going to flip-flop. So now you have the Rams versus the Panthers and the Seahawks at the Saints.
Okay.
Listen, those are 2 games I'm going to enjoy watching. Again, I think it's a brutal matchup for the Rams. And if that happens, I'm unsure who to pick as of this moment. But, and I know you don't want to see Seattle in the playoffs. I understand that. Like, you guys are like, the Seattle's like that mosquito that just won't go in. They're that fly that somehow always makes its way into your house. They're like, gosh darn. And you're like, you know what? I don't want to hang flypaper because then I look like I'm in somewhere south of here. And I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to go after it with fly swatter. And you keep missing. That's the Seahawks right there. They keep finding a way to make their way into the playoffs. And I think they get in by the skin of their teeth.
Well,
that's how I see this playing out.
I will tell you right now, you are not going to beat the Rams with a quarterback and a tight end. We've beaten better quarterbacks than Cam Newton this year, and we played better tight ends than Greg Olsen this year. Now, I know Greg Olsen was injured, missed quite a few games.
You can tell me this all you want, and I get your side, but the playoffs are a different animal. Carolina's been there. Rams haven't.
You know what? In 1999, the Rams played the Vikings. The Rams had never been there. The Vikings were veterans. They obliterated Minnesota. They played the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers had been there. The Rams hadn't. They beat Tampa Bay. The Super Bowl were 2 teams that had never been there before, and they were there. So I'm like John Madden. Don't talk to me about playoff experience. It doesn't mean anything. In the end, you've got to beat the guy across from you. And if you're capable of doing it, and when I look at the matchups, I say the same thing I did against Seattle. Who's better, the Rams D-line or the Panthers offensive line? Eric? Who's better?
The Rams O-line or the Panthers defensive line?
No, the Rams D-line and Carolina's O-line.
Okay.
Right? The Rams linebackers or the Panthers running backs? We'll go with the Rams. The Rams secondary or the Panthers wide receivers? Again, I got to go with the Rams. Those safeties and Tremaine Johnson is much better than anything the freaking Panthers have, right? Now we go to defense. The Rams O-line or the Panthers D-line? You want to give the advantage to Carolina?
That's why they play the games. Doesn't matter what it says on paper right now.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is, it mattered what was on paper when the Rams went into Seattle and you thought they were going to lose. Like, at certain points, it's like John Madden. It's like John. But you thought it was going to be a really close game, okay? And no.
It was closer than what had happened, yeah, but nobody expected it.
We might need to go back to the tape. I think you picked Seattle in that game, but
I did not pick Seattle.
Okay. My point is this. It's like John Madden said. What you did in the regular season, it matters in the playoffs. And what the Rams are really good at is not what the Panthers are really good at. And don't get me wrong, I don't think the Rams are going to steamroll them 42-7, but I do think it'll be a 10-point game. I think the Rams will probably pull away in the second half and then maintain their lead till the end. I don't care who the Rams play in the wild card game. I care where they're seated, not for who they're going to play, but for the potential of getting one more home game before they have to go on the road again. Because I lived through '89, and we went to, we went to New England, and then we went to Philadelphia, and then we went to New York, and then we went to San Francisco. After a while, that mileage catches up to you when you're playing that kind of quality opponent week in and week out going into the Super Bowl. The Rams in this case would have to go to Philly, to New Orleans or Minnesota, and then again to Minnesota, potentially again. If I were the Rams, I'd just stay there for the Super Bowl. But, none of this matters if they can't win the wild card game. And I do think Carolina is a better matchup, but I don't think Carolina gets the advantage over the Rams if those two teams play. I'm sorry. They're not better than the Rams, and if they do beat the Rams, it's because of officiating, turnovers, or missed tackles. That's it. Or blown coverage. It's not going to be because the Rams went, well, we've never been here before, and Carolina has, so we can't win this game. Because guess what? Atlanta's been there before too, and the Rams haven't. Are we going to pick Atlanta?
No, because Atlanta's not making the playoffs.
Okay. Seattle's been there before. Are we going to pick Seattle? Are we going to make that mistake again?
Well, the only way you'd face them would be in the championship game.
Unless somehow the Rams get the 3 seed. I mean, I don't foresee them, like you, beating the 49ers, resting all these players, because I don't think they have that kind of depth. But let me ask you this question. The Rams beat San Francisco with all their backups. What does that tell you about the Rams' depth?
Well, it tells me that, I'd have to know a little bit more about the game. How many times did Garoppolo turn it over? Where did the Rams get the ball after the turnovers? And if it was inside the red zone the whole time, then San Francisco just played a crap game.
Or did the Rams
beat them with the backups? If they beat them with the backups and it's a legit clean game, then it tells me more about the Rams' depth that they actually have it when we didn't think they had it.
Right.
More than anything you could tell me about the 49ers.
Right. Well, as I said, John Madden, I keep quoting him today, he said good defenses don't get turnovers, they force them. So, it's not like Garoppolo would just give them the ball. The Rams would have to make the interception. They'd have to make the fumble. Special teams will be a big thing. Pharoh Cooper's still going to be playing, so we'll see what they can do on special teams. I don't want to get into the wild card game. It sounds like you're apparently going to pick Carolina, which is fine. I'm not. It's not that I'm worried about Carolina. Yes, I do think they're a better team than Atlanta. So therefore, yes, I think they're going to be a better matchup or a tougher matchup for the Rams. But for me, you hit the nail on the head when you say you're playing with the football gods when you try to predict your own seedings. It's a dangerous game to play. And it always ends up biting you in the rear end. Maybe there's been the time or two where it's really worked. But, if I'm Minnesota and I see that the Rams are resting their starters and they have an opportunity for the 3 seed, that's going to give me infinitely more confidence in the event that I play the Rams because they were afraid and they tried to duck us. And if I'm the Ram players, I am wondering right now at home, why the hell are we doing this? Why are we willing to give up the 3 seed? Are we really that afraid of Minnesota? Does McVay really not have the answer in 2 weeks to go, or 3 weeks to go into Minnesota and win. It does ponder the mind a little bit as a player. So I think this is a rookie coach listening to the wrong people, making a dumb decision, and it won't be a mistake he'll make again.
If I'm Gurley, I'm going in there. I'm like, Coach, I'm playing.
Well, I would be with you on that one. I'd be like,
They're like, I want to play half. Give me 20 touchdowns, then I'll come home.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean,
that's more individual right there. But listen, we've seen way too many teams rest guys in week 17 and they come out completely flat in the first game of the playoffs. Whether or not you have a bye week or whether or not you're resting to play in the wild card round.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen too many times.
Yeah.
Too many times to count. I've seen it plenty of times with Bears when they were legit like 1, 2, or 3 seed. I've seen it with other teams as well. It's just not one. It's everyone.
No, and I think the problem for me, like, I understand McVay's thinking. They've traveled more than any team has traveled in a 2-year period than anybody in NFL history. And this has been a really taxing year as far as travel. And if you can save them some wear and tear a week, but it doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel like this is the right move. And we'll see how it unfolds. Me and you are both picking the Niners. Sorry, Ramley, but, I know our guys are good, but I don't know if we're that good. And, let's keep in mind what the 49ers did do with Garoppolo just a week ago. And I told you the Niners are going to be a different team with Garoppolo. I picked the Niners to win pretty much every game but one since Garoppolo's been the starter. And you gave me crap early on. And now you're singing my tune. This guy's legit. He's 6-0 all-time as a starter. And, we barely beat the 49ers back in week 2. Now, granted, we're a different team. But I don't like this decision. So we'll see what happens. He's a young coach. Maybe he needs to learn his lesson. I think, we'll worry about the playoffs when the playoffs come. But you're supposed to be worried about one game at a time. And now all of a sudden you're telling your players that you're worried about the playoff game. And you're looking past San Francisco. I just think it's a contradictory message than what you've been sending your players all year long to this point. And I just think there's going to be a little too much celebrating of the division title. And, you get punched in the mouth. And granted, the Rams bounced back this year. They've not lost 2 games in a row yet. But you're flirting with disaster. Just any way you want to look at it. So, Eric, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm just crunching some numbers here. The last 2 years, the Rams by almost 2,000 miles have gone and traveled the most. The second leading team behind the Rams, with just under 2,000 less miles, is actually the Raiders.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fascinating. The Rams last year traveled 5,500 more miles than the next closest team, which was the Raiders.
Yeah.
Which was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And now they're 2,400 miles more than the Cardinals for this season.
Yeah. It's been ridiculous. The schedule makers have been brutal. The only thing that's good is I think the Rams next year play the AFC West. Don't quote me on that. They played the East. They may play the North next year, which would just mean more travel because they're going to go to Pittsburgh. God forbid the Steelers have to go to the East Coast. And if they do play Pittsburgh, it's probably going to be in London.
They play the AFC West.
Okay, thank God. Okay. All right. So they
play.
play.
The furthest you're going to have to go in a way game would be whoever wins the NFC South. So if it's New Orleans, hey, you only got to fly halfway the country.
Yeah.
I mean, the furthest east you go is Detroit.
Yeah.
So what are you doing next year? Are you gonna come to Grand Bear again?
We'll have to wait and see. Why not?
Anyways, so yeah, you asked me if there's anything else I want to add. Yeah, Week 17 is about as predictable as Week 1.
Yeah.
Because there's so many teams that rest guys, so many teams that really have nothing left to play for, aka the 49ers, aka the Cardinals. And then there's dangerous teams like the Bills. You just never know what you're going to get out of them. Anthony, I texted you the other day. If the Ravens, Titans, and Chargers win, and the Bills win, okay, I want to share this with everybody out there as well. The Bills would lose the tiebreaker because of the game they started Nathan Peterman.
Yep.
How is that if your drought continues to year 20?
Right. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I know the next time we talk on here, there's going to be quite a few coaching changes, so I know within all those, there could be as many as 10 coaching changes. I'm not really going to go into those right now. I know we've talked about those at the halfway point, but Week 17. Here's the thing you want to look at for Week 17, especially with those teams going into the playoffs, is who gets injured, and maybe out for the duration of the playoffs.
Yeah.
That could potentially hurt a team's chances. We already seen Carson Wentz go down.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, Philly hasn't missed a beat. They looked mediocre against Oakland. If Oakland was a better team, they would have went before with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think Philadelphia is a little vulnerable going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as strong as they are with Wentz. Don't get me wrong. I think Foles is a very good quality backup. He's had good seasons in the NFL when he was a starter. But for some reason, Alshon Jeffrey had no catches on 2 targets in the game against Oakland.
Yeah.
This is why Philly needs to start Foles in Week 17 and their whole team for at least a half to 3 quarters to get those reps to get on the same page. That'll work wonders rather than sitting Foles and sitting Ajayi and sitting Ertz and sitting Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So look for that. If you see something like that, point it out. Put it in the comments section. Hey, Philadelphia's doing this.
Yeah.
The Vikings are doing this. I expect the Vikings to start Case Keenum for a half, and then Bridgewater to take over the second half. Do I expect the Bears to win? No. But I expect to see Teddy Bridgewater out there sometime during the game.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting.
I expect a lot of handoffs to McKinnon and Latavius Murray. I expect also their third string running back, whoever that may be, to get a lot of PT because you want to take the pressure off, that running back position. Diggs and Thielen and Rudolph, probably half to 3 quarters. As soon as they get a surmountable lead, you're going to see those guys start to come out.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I just want to say thanks to the fans again. Thanks for the subscribers. Keep your comments coming. Keep the subscriptions coming. Share the show. Let people know. Let us know what kind of a job we're doing. Please make sure you make comments. I know some people don't like the job we do, and you know what? That's okay. You don't have to. But I think enough people do, and we appreciate everything. And, we won't see you until the new year, so have a great end of your 2017 and to your 2018. And look, I'm excited. Don't misunderstand today. I'm excited that the Rams won the division. It's an awesome feeling. 11-5, 12-4. It's still a pretty darn good year. And, now we'll buckle it up and get ready for the postseason. And when's the last time we've been able to say that? My oldest son, who's 13, wasn't even born the last time the Rams won the division. He was 0 when the Rams made the playoffs the last time, and I didn't even know him. So it was a big deal. So, we're excited. But there's a lot of football left to play, and Week 17 is going to bring, I feel, agony for some, maybe even for us. elation for others, maybe even for us. But keep the subscriptions coming, keep the comments coming, and thank you for all that you do. Again, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Eric.
And this is LA Rams Central, and go Rams!